My name is Christoph, and I'm a high school student in my first year, so I'm 16 years old. This story took place during the second week of Easter vacation in 2023, when I was 15 years old, and I want to mention that it happened in my mother's house. At that time, my mother had decided to renovate the kitchen because it was really outdated. So there was this blonde guy with blue eyes who came to start the work, which involved putting up plastic sheets on the walls and a divider in my living room, which is next to the kitchen. At the end of the day, I had to go to the dentist to pick up a dental impression, and my mother had informed the worker that we would be back in 1 hour and 30 minutes. However, since the appointment was just to pick up an item, we returned after only 45 minutes. On the way back, my mother suggested getting kebabs and doing a good deed by dropping off the worker at the train station. When I returned to offer him a ride to the station, I noticed he was very uneasy with a nervous smile, as if to say everything was fine. I insisted that he come with us, and he agreed. Along the way, he explained that his name was Brian. I'm changing his name for anonymity, and that he was originally from Moldova. He also mentioned that he lived alone in Paris but had 2 children living in his home country. We arrived at the station, dropped him off, grabbed our kebabs, and went home. After finishing eating, I decided to take a bath, as I love doing that all the time. However, this time, to my dismay, the water turned from hot to cold. So I spent 2 hours in lukewarm water, then got out and returned to my upstairs room. Immediately upon opening the door, I noticed that my PC was open and turned on to my lock screen wallpaper, even though I distinctly remembered closing it before going downstairs for my bath. I asked my mother if she had been in my room or touched my PC, and she said no, that she had stayed in her room watching the news. After a quick search of my room turned up nothing, I decided to finally go to sleep. At 5 a.m., I woke up sweating and shivering intensely, which had never happened to me before. I had a feeling of danger and that something or someone was nearby. So I grabbed a knife because, yes, it's a bit scary, but I have a passion for edged weapons, probably from manga, and I have a collection of knives, katanas, and shurikens on my bedroom wall. With the knife, I searched my room again but found nothing. However, the feeling didn't go away, so I locked my door and messaged my mother to see if she was awake and had the same feeling. But she didn't respond. I waited for 3 hours until I heard her walking in her room. She came to see me, and I explained what had happened that night. She told me I was probably just being paranoid and that everything was fine. She also warned me that Brian would arrive around 10 a.m. to continue the work, and that since she would be leaving for work, I would be alone with him. She assured me that I wouldn't need to go downstairs to let him in because she had told him she kept the keys in a woodshed next to the door. She then went to work, and I went back to sleep, locking my door. I woke up at 11:30 a.m., went downstairs to make food in the basement because the kitchen was under construction. And when I didn't find Brian there, I didn't think much of it. I went back upstairs and I ran into him. As soon as I saw him, that bad feeling returned, but he started talking to me. I tried to end the conversation and quickly went back to my locked room. 10 minutes later, Brian knocked on my door, asking for help carrying something. I didn't respond because I really didn't want to see him again. But he started trying to open the door and began kicking it hard. So my first instinct was to grab a knife, lock myself in my bathroom, which is in my room, and call the police. I explained in a panic what was happening, and the woman on the line said she was sending 2 cars, which would arrive in 10 minutes. While waiting, Brian managed to enter my room and began breaking down the bathroom door. I told him I had called the police, that they would be arriving any minute, that I was armed with a knife, and that I wouldn't hesitate to use it. Upon hearing this, he stopped banging on the door and left. The police arrived and caught Brian as he was trying to flee. My mother immediately came home, saw me, and burst into tears, telling me she should have listened to me. A few days later, the police called to explain that Brian was wanted for kidnapping, identity theft, torture, and murder. I believe that bad feeling I had during the night was him returning and hiding outside my room in the house because he knew where the spare keys were hidden. But now he is in prison, and I hope never to see him again. It's amazing how our instincts can be useful, and I'm glad I was able to lock my door because previously I couldn't, as I didn't have a key. I also thank my weird passion for knives because I don't know if Brian would have left if I hadn't mentioned it. And especially thanks to the police who arrived so quickly and caught him. I am from a small town that houses 3 different elementary schools and only 1 middle school and high school, connected by the gymnasium and a tunnel between the 2 buildings. I had lived there my entire life, and I went to a different school than most other people mentioned in this story. Back when I was in middle school, I had a litany of bullies who loved making every moment of my day a living hell. They did pretty much everything you could think of, ranging from pranks in the middle of class to downright physical assault. But all of them were nothing compared to this one girl I met at the beginning of 7th grade, whom we're going to call Sadie. Sadie was a stereotypical mean girl in every sense of the word. Loved fashion, had a gaggle of friends willing to do her bidding, and every guy was into her or wanted her. She was the kid with the highest amounts of detentions, argued a lot with teachers, and the principal pretty much did nothing about her actions, and made a habit of having fun with some specific kids, which included me. I was a plus-sized kid, a scaredy cat, gullible, and a bit of a pushover. But I did try to do well in school and kept to myself. But that didn't do much. As soon as Sadie took notice of me, she took it upon herself to make sure every time we even saw each other, she'd make me miserable. At the beginning, it wasn't anything much. She started rumors about me, talked shit about me online. I didn't have social media yet, so I didn't find that out until later, and in school, and threw things at me that ranged from her garbage to one of her textbooks. It wasn't terrible at first. Sadie was annoying, sure, but I had workarounds, so I just ignored her. But when other kids saw that I wasn't going to fight back, they joined in and took things way too far. Almost daily, I have been chased in the halls, ganged up on in the bathrooms, had my food stolen, gotten blamed by the teachers for their dumb actions in class, and many other things. These kids had me on edge and feeling practically worthless for the entire school year, to the point of me considering just running away to avoid the hell of going back to school. Why didn't I tell the school, you may ask? Well, I tried. Dozens of times. Teachers, guidance counselors, even the principal. But they didn't care. The school was honestly not the best, and they were pretty negligent to everything that didn't involve funds, sports events, and GPA for the year. So, they gave no heed to me when I tried to tell them what was going on with Sadie and her lackeys. These are some of their real responses from incidents that happened. When I had gotten my backpack thrown down the stairs, and a calculator inside that I brought from home got broken. It's your property, your problem. When Sadie had written a fat joke alongside a slur on my locker door in permanent marker. You have no evidence that it was her. When Sadie's boy toy and his friends cornered me outside the changing rooms for gym to ask me for something. They were probably just kidding around. All of them spearheaded by Sadie, who was practically in charge that year, and nothing she did was getting her into trouble. Summer could not come fast enough that year. By the time 7th grade was over, they let those kids get away with so much. I honestly gave up on trying to get outside help at that point. As I got some personal help that summer, I decided that things would be different by the time I had to go back to school for the following year. I was not going to be Sadie's personal punching bag anymore. When 8th grade started up, I was ready. I learned MMA self-defense, I defended myself vocally, I wasn't so quiet anymore, and I fought back. And it worked. None of the old bullies from last year even looked my way again. Except for Sadie, who still tried to pull her usual stunts. But the longer I showed her I didn't care, the more it pissed her off. Honestly, it felt like ample revenge to all of the shit she put me through last year. Sadie, however, would not let it go for the life of her. I didn't know it then, but this whole act of hers would end up taking a bad turn. One day, I was walking to the gym with Sadie following close behind me. She did not share a gym class with me, but she did like following me around in between classes and trying to get a rise out of me. This day, however, was not great for me. I don't exactly remember why now, but I was stressed out, and I kept getting pissed off over whatever went wrong that day. Sadie, following behind, trying out different insults and comments about me, sent me over the edge. In a quick motion, I stopped walking, spun around, pushed Sadie backwards, and spit towards her, with it landing on her leg. I told her to just fuck off and leave me alone. I didn't know what I was really expecting her reaction to be, but it sure as hell wasn't what she did. Sadie just stood there, frozen, staring at me. I expected her to be coughing up blood from rage, or her screaming, or anything at all. But she just stood there, as if a deer in the headlights. I didn't think about it at the time, as I left for gym not long after, and eventually forgot about it. After school, I was walking across the school building to head for the parking lot next to the high school building, where I was to catch the bus. Everything felt normal, until I saw Sadie not far behind me. I didn't think anything weird of it, so ignored it and kept walking, until I noticed she was taking the same path I was to the buses. This wouldn't be odd if she actually rode the buses at all. Sadie walked to and from school every single day. If not that, someone would come pick her up. But the carpool lot was in the opposite direction of the buses. I took a different path than my normal route, around the back of the school. I looked back to check, and yep, Sadie was taking the exact same path I was, and she stopped walking every time I looked back at her. I began picking up the pace a bit, and from behind I could hear her running to catch up. By the time I was nearing the bus lot, she was somewhere around 10 feet right behind me, still jogging to follow me. I definitely did not want her to learn which bus was mine, nor did I want her to follow me home, so I decided to fake her out. I jumped onto a different bus, much to the dismay of the driver, and Sadie ran in after me. After she got in front of the bus driver to yell at her about something, I ran off and raced to my actual bus, which was all the way on the other end where this particular bus was. I got in, and the bus drove away just as Sadie got off to see where I went. The next day, I didn't see Sadie anywhere at school. Not in any of the classes, not at lunch, not even after school either. I asked, but nobody knew where she went. This went on for the rest of the week. The bus incident took place on a Monday, and the disappearing act happened on Tuesday. By Thursday, I began to relax about the whole thing. I still didn't understand what Sadie was doing with the whole bus incident, but as long as she was gone, things felt okay. Until Friday afternoon came along. Like the last few days, Sadie wasn't there, so I was pretty relaxed for most of it. When the end of the school day came, I was about to walk out the front doors to the building, when something stopped me. I had a horrible feeling in my stomach, telling me not to go outside. I had no idea where that came from, but I thought it was just my leftover anxiety playing tricks on me. So, I headed out anyway, not still twisting. The middle school and high school were all a part of one connecting path system, which means we all had hallways and walkways connecting both the main middle school and the main high school buildings, with one long sidewalk path out front. The parking lot where I had to walk to my bus was on the opposite end of this long sidewalk, which ran in front of both the middle school and in front of the high school. This can make for a pretty long walk, and the doors leading into the high school, often flooded with students, make for some interesting obstacles. This would all come into play when this happened. I had just walked down the outside stairs to the sidewalk when I saw someone run around a corner from the building. I looked over and it was Sadie, looking as pissed as a rabid dog, full sprinting right towards me. I bolted, running faster than I ever had in my whole life, running off nothing but pure adrenaline and fear. Sadie was catching up quickly behind me, and all I could do was run and pray for help. I dodged between crowds of kids and just tried that to lose her somewhere in the masses, not caring at all if I bumped into people, only afraid that Sadie was still behind me. By the time I reached the buses, I didn't see her anywhere, so I stopped and nearly collapsed to catch my breath. I felt relief for only a second, until she popped out of nowhere from the side of the crowd and lunged at me. Sadie grabbed me by the hair and backpack, swinging me around in a circle as I tried to get her off me. She kept pulling and jerking so much I felt my hair being ripped at some points, but she kept going. I screamed for help, kicking and punching blindly in Sadie's direction, But either nobody wanted to get involved, or were too scared to break us up, because there was nobody who came forward. Sadie let go of my hair to reach for something behind her. And what happened next was only a miracle. My older brother was walking out of the high school drinking a soda when he saw the scene and ran to help. He was the only one who knew about Sadie and recognized her when we had gotten to school in the mornings. He threw his soda at Sadie's head, which startled her enough to let me go and drop whatever she was holding. I grabbed my brother and we took off for the bus, making it just before it drove off. After we found a seat, I looked back outside. What I saw still gives me chills. Sadie was on the ground, arms pinned by a teacher, and right on the ground next to her was an open hunting knife. I knew without a doubt that was hers, because of the sound I heard when she dropped it earlier. Next Monday, I got called down to the office where my brother was also waiting. We got pulled into the counselor's office, where there were 2 police officers waiting. Apparently, after we ran, a high school teacher saw Sadie picking up the weapon and apprehended her, while another person called the police. They got Sadie into interrogation, and now they needed to hear what happened from me. I practically broke down right then and there and told them everything. What Sadie did to me last year, what I almost did because of her torment, the bus incident the week prior, and what happened on the sidewalk. My brother put his arm around me while I just sat there, nearly sobbing my words out. The police and the counselor just sat there writing down what I said, but they looked on sympathetically. One of the officers asked me if I would like to tell my parents so they could press charges. At this point, I just wanted everything to end about this horrible situation and be done. So I just told them to do whatever they wanted. I just wanted this to stop. The counselor could tell I was already upset enough, so he sent me back to class. And me and my brother made a promise to never speak of this again. Sadie ended up getting into juvie for the rest of the school year, all the way until halfway through second semester of freshman year of high school. The school also had some changes to it too. Police officers were now on duty during school hours in the middle and high schools. We had stricter policies with bullying, and kids could now stay with teachers before/during/after school if they needed to. I never saw Sadie again after that, not even in passing. I later learned from one of her old friends that after senior year she dropped out to get her GED, because the incident on her police record meant college was impossible. It's been over 9 years since that day on the sidewalk. I will admit this is honestly not as bad as what other kids probably had to go through, but I still feel the trauma from that time in middle school and especially from what Sadie did to me. After middle school, I had developed depression, severe social anxiety, and PTSD from the bullies. I can't fully blame the situation for everything, as maybe if I pushed a bit harder with the teachers and the principal, maybe this wouldn't have happened in the first place. But eventually things did end up getting better. I just wish I could go back to my 13-year-old self that had to endure all of that to say that everything was going to be okay. I am doing better now. I am looking into therapy. I am in university right now, and I cannot be prouder of how far I've come. So, to the psychopath of a bully that tormented me all those years ago and almost stabbed me, I am in university right now, but staying with my parents at their house for the summer. I was hanging out with one of my friends and we decided to go to a party. I met this guy around my age. We were talking and having fun, but it was nothing too serious. Or so I thought. We exchanged phone numbers. We hung out a couple of times, but he became incredibly clingy right from the start, so I decided to distance myself in the hope that he would get the hint and back off. Well, he didn't. When I stopped responding, he sent me over 100 messages, with each message becoming increasingly more aggressive as time went on. Keep in mind, it had been less than 2 weeks since we first met. I finally responded and told him he needed to chill out. He appeared to calm down a bit after I responded, but he then asked for a phone call. I agreed and we talked for a while. He told me that he couldn't stop thinking about me, that I was the best thing that ever happened to him, etc. Just a bunch of stuff that is way too intense to say to someone you barely know. I tried to let him down gently, reminding him that I was only home for the summer and wasn't looking for anything serious beyond a fling. But this only made him angrier. He started yelling at me, insulting me, calling me a slut, basically a complete 180 from what he had been saying mere minutes ago. Then all of a sudden the phone went silent. After a pause, he said in a quiet voice, "Bitch, you had better get ready because I am coming over for you." And then he hung up the phone. This was very frightening because he knew my parents were out of town for the week and that I was staying at their house alone. However, he didn't know where my parents' house was because I was always the one driving, and he didn't know my friend either, so I thought he had no way of figuring it out. Since, again, I'm normally living at school in another state. Regardless, I locked all the doors and shut the blinds just in case. After a while, maybe an hour or so, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I looked at my phone and saw a notification on my lock screen. It was from the Ring app, indicating there had been movement on my parents' camera. It was him. If you watch the video, you can clearly see something in his hand. When he notices the camera, however, he left. I immediately blocked him on everything and reported the incident. I have no idea what he planned to do once he got here. It was terrifying to realize that he had come over when I was asleep and defenseless, and completely unaware of his presence. As I would later find out, he was able to get my address from my phone number. Apparently he Googled it and it returned my dad's name as the owner of the phone number, along with my parents' address. Since I am on my parents' phone plan, I guess it shows up that I still live here. This revelation was fucking horrifying as I never knew my phone number could reveal my home address. I am still extremely upset that this kind of private information is on the internet for anyone to find, as it's incredibly dangerous that websites will just give this away to anyone. Please learn from my mistakes and do not give anyone your phone number unless you trust them. I found out that you can get a free Google Voice number to text and call people, and that number can't be traced back to you so easily. My advice is to use a disposable number for anyone you're talking to that you meet informally or online. I still can't sleep at night. Hopefully this never happens to anyone else. Recently, I moved out of my apartment. I simply had to because I didn't feel safe with my landlords. I lived in this really nice Dumbo apartment in Brooklyn for a few months with my roommate, who paid for most of the rent since her parents are super rich. Our landlords were actually this seemingly really sweet couple who lived a few floors above with their kids. The first few weeks were somewhat normal, except for the fact that every time I saw their kids in the elevator, they would scream at me before they got off and then just ran away. I thought it was funny and cute at first, but then their eldest son came to visit and started doing the same thing, and he looked about my age. I didn't really think much of it since maybe he was just playing with his younger siblings. Shit got weird really when I bumped into all of them together and we talked for a bit. Out of nowhere, while we were having a pleasant conversation, the dad apologized to me, saying that his son might act strange. I was pretty shocked with him just saying that out of the blue. I paused for a bit and I can't really remember what I said, but remember just wanting to get the hell out of this conversation now. A few days later, I bump into the dad again in the elevator. I was pretty standoffish and he was just talking about how great my apartment is and how much of a generous guy he is for giving us such a low rate. Then he asked if I could babysit his kids, as he and his wife and his eldest son would be at a dinner. I said no at first, but he counteroffered saying he'd pay $150 an hour, and being the greedy idiot that I am, I agreed. This is where I fucked up. When I get to his place, I was speechless. His apartment wrapped around the entire floor of the building. It was the nicest apartment I will ever see, that's for sure. About an hour in, everything was normal. I was playing some fighting game with his kids when we suddenly heard the front door slam. I told them to stay there as I peeked to see what was going on, and I see the dad falling all over the place, clearly drunk SL. He started walking toward me and at the last minute fell face first onto his couch. I must have popped a blood vessel trying to hold in my laughter. I asked if he was okay and walked over to assist him. He then turned around, looked at me and said, "My wife will let us, please." When I tried asking what his wife, walked up to me, thanked me, paid me, and told me to come back another time. I just kinda went back to my apartment in shock, wondering WTF just happened. And I definitely wasn't going back. I told my roommate and she told me that she also bumped into the dad and he told her, "My wife is cool, just so you know," with no explanation, and just left. At this point, we knew that we sure as hell were not renewing our lease. We didn't see our landlords until our final month. We kinda joked to our friends about how our landlords were creepy cucks. The next time I see them was actually with my boyfriend, who was well aware of what they were trying to do. It was an intensely awkward elevator ride, as when they saw us in there, they just went quiet and smiled and nodded at us repeatedly. As we step out the elevator, the dad shouts "hey" to us and winks at me as the doors closed. After that, I asked my BF to stay with us for the remainder of our lease, cause at this point my roommate and I were freaked the fuck out. Our final and creepiest encounter was a few days before moving out. My roommate walked out the apartment and both the landlords were sitting in front of the elevators, waiting for us. She said they started sobbing when they saw her and then begged us to stay. They apparently apologized for making us uncomfortable and said they thought we were the pretty young girls they were waiting for. She didn't say a word to them and got on the elevator and called me to warn me they were outside, and then they started to knock. My BF answered and said when the guy saw him he asked if I was here. Of course my BF said no, but they tried walking in anyway. I walk out my room saying I'll call the police if they don't leave, and they beg me to not and run out the apartment. A few days ago, we get a text from a random number saying we could live there 6 months free if we just gave them a few nights. Of course, blocked and deleted. The whole thing was such an uncomfortable experience living there all those months, especially knowing they had keys to our apartment. My husband Jim and I own an antique business in a big old bizarre barn of a building. 5 floors, multiple other tenants including a restaurant. Halloween was a Monday last year. We locked up the business at 5 p.m. and we went to an early dinner across town. Then we got a call from Sonatrol, our security monitoring company, at 6:30. A motion detect on the lower level. Then another. We left in a tearing hurry, but figured, it's a bird. Or a rat. We don't have rats, but, something. Maybe a cat. It's way too early for a break-in after all. I went inside the main level upstairs and disarmed the alarm, and started fumbling noisily with the keys and the big iron gate, one of many that separate the floors at night. Jim checked the perimeter outside for signs of a break-in. Nothing, doors and windows intact. Definitely, absolutely a bird or a rat or a cat. Dusk was long gone. The shadows had settled in and taken over. Just wardrobes loomed in the dark. Wardrobes and nothing more, right? I headed down below to the location of the alarm, trusting Jim would follow. I am accustomed to the building after dark, so I just turned on my phone light, not the overheads, and walked around boldly like I own the place. I looked in the corner with the motion detector. Nothing, just its red eye blinking mindlessly at me. No hats, no catches, no barges. I turned and went the other way while Jim poked around a few aisles over. And there it was. A fucking burglary kit sitting in the middle of the floor. Bolt cutters, a fire extinguisher, just sitting there waiting. I have never gotten a bigger case of sheer terror so fast. After all, there was no broken window or door. So he was still there, in the dark. With me, I hissed, "Jim, please," several times. And he didn't hear me. I literally couldn't scream, just like in those stupid goddamn dreams. My voice stuck. Just me, the spot-lit burglary tools, and a hostile presence lurking in the dusty shadows, watching while I whispered for someone to save me. Finally, 1,000 years or maybe 10 seconds later, Jim wondered why I had taken root in the hallway and came to see. He saw what I was frozen pointing at and was like, "Oh fuck." We bolted out the front door to call 911 and wait. And we abandoned the building to the burglar. An eternal 5 minutes later, the police showed up and were initially pretty unimpressed with our find of the crowbar and fire extinguisher, until we pulled up the security footage that revealed the actual horror. The face of my new sleep paralysis demon. So this guy, as is obvious, he is built like a lean, mean brick shithouse. He'd crouched on a landing behind a bookcase when we closed, and watched me and my staff lock up. Bided his time. Then, calm as could be, he walked out and went to the men's restroom in the hallway downstairs. That area isn't set for motion detect for a variety of reasons. He spent a while in there moving around with the door open. He constructed the mask using one of ours and a fake flower wreath to hold it on. Purple plastic clematis. He looked right into the camera barefaced and then put the mask on, stared at it fixedly in his mask for a time and finally pulled his gloves on. He stacked a few solid body vintage suitcases in front of a tall iron gate and hopped right over like it was nothing. He ran down the hall, triggering the 6:30 silent alarm, and looped the floor. He ran back into the hall and moved a ladder to hop back to the other side of the gate and, bizarrely, just repeated this whole thing a few times. Then he went to the basement, wormed over a 15-inch gap over yet another iron gate. Back to the hall again, stared into the camera more. He was moving fast up and over, back and forth, upstairs and downstairs parkour style almost. Then he got the tools out and peeled apart one of our steel lock boxes with the crowbar, and stole a handful of our keys to access showcases. At this point, he heard me fumbling with the gate and keys upstairs. He ditched the stolen keys and tools and hid, watching me while he waited in the dark. We exited to call 911, and he ran back to the basement. In the basement, there is access to a dirt tunnel that circles the perimeter of the building. He broke the door open and entered. Spiders the size of dinner plates live in there. He had no light. It's muddy and dank. It's, in a word, petrifying. There is a tiny exit hatch if you walk the whole thing and take the multiple turns that dumps you into the busy kitchen of a restaurant, whereupon one would need to stroll past the line cooks, out into the restaurant proper with cameras, and then one could leave their front door, plastered with mud, which does leave tracks. Speaking from experience. When we found it, there was his clear entrance into the tunnel but no exit tracks. No muddy footprints, nobody walking out on the restaurant cameras, and the cooks noticed nothing. It was a busy night though. Reviewing the footage, timing it all, tracing his path from camera to camera and searching the building carefully took hours. By the end, all of us, including the police, were starting to lose our collective cool and freak out. There was no chill when even the guys with guns were rattled. After all, where the fuck did he go? Jim and the two officers had no choice but to walk the dirt tunnel. The cops took one look and were like, absolutely not. Jim insisted, and so they made him walk point. They made it about half the tunnel before the cops were like, fuck no. You are leaving with us and we are gonna review more footage from the restaurant where there are no spiders and fuck this. Jim got the okay from them to board up both ends of the tunnel, which he did solidly, and thus the story ends. The pictures got spread widely, but we got no useful leads despite the decent face shot. Did he indeed crawl out a hatch in the busy kitchen and stroll out past the cooks, leaving no trace of mud? I guess. We got no suspicious smells coming out of the tunnel in later weeks and months, but nobody has walked the far side since. We only unboarded the tunnel last week for the split water main shenanigans. I have vowed I will use his skull in this year's Halloween display if he's dead down there.